Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Friday. It's been a fun week. Here with Matthew Ruxton today. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing good, Chris. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Um, Excited for today's conversation. Also to start this new series with you. For properties, like something so basic but so foundational to the HubSpot platform. When you don't get it right, it usually means a world of pain at some point. But when you get it right, which doesn't take nearly as much time as most people think, when you get it right, it truly is what unlocks the entire platform for you. So I appreciate you, taking this one on. You told me you're passionate about the concept, and I love talking about stuff like this. So appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Chris. I think that there's a certain amount to be said about it's such a basic building block of how we operate inside of HubSpot as administrators and as partners, and people kind of take it for granted, and it's like the one place. There's very little guidance even within HubSpot's ecosystem. Like it says, like here, create a property, and here's what they do, and then it kind of just leaves you there, and you're like, cool. And I've witnessed many of people kind of come barreling into HubSpot. They're excited, they've got the tool, they're like gung ho for it, and then they go in and they're like, I'm going to create 40 properties in the contact record that I don't need, and I'm like, like you don't just stop, think before you make a property, because it's so easy to create properties, but it's so also very easy to create properties with no forward thought on what's going to happen down the road. 2 3 months down the line as your process improves, and I'm very much a believer in the idea that perfection is the enemy of good, and sometimes you've got to get something out there and then continue to optimize. And there's nothing I think any administrator can raise their hand and say there's been a time where they've gone to optimize something and realize it requires rebuilding a property, and you're like, man, this
Dang
sucks.
it.
I wish I thought about this beforehand.
It's like, all
The
right.
amount of times I think about like the drop down selects that I should have made multi checklists, and I'm like, you can't change
Yeah.
it once you've used it, and it's the worst. I think about
And,
that all the time.
and all these records have data. So now I guess we're going to make property slash new, and then we're definitely going to go back and then, get rid of the other property at some point.
Definitely, I think a lot about the amount of times where a lot of people don't think about API names. And if I had to name one, the number of times I've misspelt something and not caught it before I've created the property, and then for a lifetime, years later, I go back in to call an API and don't know why it's working. And I'm like, oh yeah, because I can't spell color. That's why I'm not pulling the right property and getting this error every single time. So yeah, they're powerful little things, but man, they have their own little finicky things. And I hope like through these next couple of weeks we can kind of help people better understand them, and also use them, take advantage of them, and some of the cool new features, because there's so many new features coming out.
Yeah. And when we talk about CRM and customer platform, like association labels and all these new features, like, properties are really at the heart of all of it. It's how you organize your data. Um, and they're starting to spread like wildfire across the platform in terms of just easier accessibility, easier management,
Yeah.
by multiple different teams in the same places, while creating just enough boundary to not have everybody like tripping over themselves, still create sources of truth for specific teams. It's really a beautiful thing. So we'll be able to, you know could honestly talk about this probably for the rest of the year. One,
Oh
because it's
yeah.
that complex of a topic, it can be, but two, the rate and the whole reason for starting this show in the first place. Like just in the last 2 days, both of Kyle's videos have been about new CRM property cards. So
Yeah.
we're gonna,
It's perfect timing.
yeah,
Perfect timing to talk about it.
we're gonna look at it from that perspective today, kind of like the end state that you could have when you know exactly which properties are where, exactly who needs to see them and when in the process. Um, your object setup. Uh, we if you still find yourself in a place where you think you have to copy property values across all these different objects. We are no longer in that world. You've got multiple options to avoid that, which is one of the, I think, the primary sources of data, dysfunction, if you will. The classic like seems like a good idea at the time,
Yeah.
and then one thing changes and like all of a sudden the data turns to crap. So
Politics.
I'm gonna share my screen and talk about these new cards, specifically the association property list and some new ones that Kyle has shown us today and yesterday. And this is the kind of thing like I was hopeful for, when we saw Inbound last year
Yeah.
and they start talking about cards exactly like this one, where it's like deal stage tracker, and you start to see just these light visuals, which again, like any of the visuals that you see in the system are almost always based on data in a property,
Yeah.
right? So that's why, like, no matter how cool you want it to look, if you don't have the properties like understood, it's never going to do what you want it to. So as soon as I saw it happening for deals, and once you understand that, okay, we got properties and we got objects and we got a user interface, that's using both of those things. If it can happen for deals, it can happen for everything else in the system, right? So I'm excited and also not surprised at how quickly, they're able to create these cards. So as an example here, uh, we're on a contact record, and I'm a big fan of so excited to see orders coming to HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually property information from an order that I am able to see and manage on the contact record. So these days that are all these hopes of having these, one or two records to work from, we can get there now without having to copy properties everywhere, without having to duplicate properties everywhere.
The workflow vomit that you end up creating when you're like, move this over here and update this when this changes, and thinking about like, how do I make sure if I want to go one directionally, am I doing it the right way? And am my team updating the right properties in the right order? And this just creates it removes a huge roadblock for a lot of teams when it comes to adoption. And I think we can talk about adoption in a whole other year for another year about the importance of adoption. I think people watching this are very clear of the importance of adoption. But if you utilize these tools, that gives you the ability to just make their life easier. And the amount of times I've seen, like even within my own company now, our sales team see these changes and they're like, this is a lot easier for me. And I'm like, I feel like I could stop using my spreadsheet. And I'm like, hey, if I can get you out of spreadsheet, I'm done. Here's my notice. I am good to go. We've achieved everything we needed to do. But I think anyone who's worked with sales teams knows they love their spreadsheets. They love their notepad files. They love their Google Docs that go on for 40 pages instead of putting it in the CRM. I'm like, if I can get you to enter anything of value into the CRM, it is a one day for me, and I'll be celebrating by the poolside later. So
that is
this
literally the
ability
promised
to do,
land for all of
yeah,
us, I think.
100%.
Right?
So like anything that like creates that ability is is awesome, and it just removes those barriers for entry. And the thing that cracked me up is I had the opportunity to go to Inbound last year, and I remember during the product keynote, and they're talking through and they're walking through stuff, and they're like, AI is great, and we have this new sales stuff coming out and all these things. Like, also we have these center card things, but we're going to talk about other things. I'm like, no. I was like the guy like, hey, can we go back to that? Can we go back to that thing? Like, that was really important. Can we talk about that? And I went to a couple of the different training opportunities that they had at Inbound around like the center cards and the development functionality of center cards. And I kind of got a hint to this was coming, because I was like, man, I wish there was more like ability to show more properties. And they're like, it's coming. And I'm like, oh. And I got super excited when the first version of this came out, which wasn't associations. It was just, you can show 12 properties in a card. I was like, that's awesome. And then one day, with no notice, they changed it to 24. And I was so happy, and I stumbled across it one day. I was like, this is great. So I got even more excited the day I discovered that they brought out the association cards, because there's just so much power in these. Like, you can have your team enter data in one place and just run through a process in one place. And like, one of the biggest pieces of feedback I hear a lot from teams when they're trying to use HubSpot and adopt HubSpot is they'll say, I wish it was just like a form I could use to enter my data to keep me on track. And we have like playbooks for that to some extent, but sometimes playbooks can get clunky. They are ultimately like single column text documents. If you have a ton of process steps, it becomes difficult. And this just provides people that are like, hey, I don't really need a script to run through a meeting, but I know what pieces of data I want to collect. These cards give you that ability to have all that data collected in one place and dispensed across the entire CRM instantly. One of my favorite features about these cards in general is you can make a change and you don't have to hit save. And I feel like that is something that is not talked about enough, because the amount of times I have made changes, I feel like we've all been there. You like set up an index page just perfectly, and then you click something and go, I didn't save that. And then you go back and it's back to the way it was, and you cry for a little bit, and you go mope on the porch. Then you come back and you fix it. But it's the ability for these updates to happen right away in real time is a huge asset that just isn't talked about nearly enough, I think. And something to make sure that your teams are aware of. They're making changes in real time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a training element to all of this. With great power comes great responsibility. And, but that flexibility, like I always try to approach it from like, let's lean into that and then train the team. Let's not create
Yeah.
inflexibility because we don't trust our team. Like, that's not a good place
Yeah.
to be, right? That's when HubSpot stops working for you.
Yeah.
Another example I'm going to show before we, start to make some cards, because there's some new ones that we get to show
Yeah.
too. And I might even have to sign up for a beta first. But so these are two. So contacts is obviously a base, standard object. Orders is almost a fully native object. We don't have an order record view yet, but you can make orders without integrations right now. But even custom objects. So a lot of what I do to manage this show is supported right now by the Event Happily, object suite, like that app.
Yep.
And this is an example of, and I actually built this out this morning because I had some of this done already. I saw this card could exist now based on a 1-minute video from Kyle yesterday. And what it's showing here is we've got Stuart, who's done a few shows with me, listed as a Happily speaker, which is a custom object. And here we are showing his Happily sessions with a tracker view. Like, so this is a different object. This is associated object. And I can manage and I can flip through the different objects in case they're in different stages. Don't mind my, not perfectly maintained data, but we can pick, 4 properties here.
Yeah.
We can manage the pipeline stage. Like, that's kind of an update too, because I had originally put the pipeline stage here so I could manage it. They've
Yeah.
added that here, right?
I
So
think it's awesome. It gives you backup property, which is
right.
awesome.
Yep. And so this is like 2 custom objects working together. And let's go ahead and build one. Because I think, let's, because basically any of these associated properties, let's say I want to see like more of the sessions properties, than just this tracker. I think they're doing a great job of not trying to overwhelm. Like, if the purpose of this card is like to get a visual understanding, you should not throw 24 properties on it too.
Right.
Right.
100%. You got to
But
keep it clean. You've got to make it like something that, because I'm a huge believer in making the screen functional for every person who uses it. And like, I will say I'm blessed to have an ultra wide monitor, But that also comes with the curses of sometimes I build things for my ultra wide monitor and forget that we have sales teams that work on 13-inch MacBook Airs. So it's really
Yes.
important, I think, to like make sure you don't create huge, big things with these cards, and those sort of protections are in place there to kind of remind you, like, hey, you don't need you don't need 8 properties. Like, pick the 4 that are most important. Um,
Yeah. And I
Make
think
it work a lot
that's,
easier.
I'm glad you brought that up because as we come back here, like you notice I had to like close the sidebar down. And I know there's been talk of like, what does a 2 column world look like on records? And uh, we're going to figure that out. But obviously,
Yeah,
this has been a huge step towards not having infinite scrolls, on the left and right,
yeah,
not having to click everywhere. As nice as the preview panel can be, it's still an additional click. Uh, so really maximizing, you've said you've got a few, tabs in your views
yeah.
so that multiple teams can be on the same record understanding stuff. But as we open here, if we want to make changes, click on customize record and go to default view.
And I will say,
Right.
I think you're using the new. I don't know if it's out of beta. I never know when things go out of beta. Someone's like, "Yeah, this is the new thing," and then someone's like, "It's not out yet." I'm like, "Oops." I think this is the new unified record view editor, correct?
Yes. This is
Which, if you
the
haven't used it, why are you sleeping on? Go like, so go. If it's still in beta, go get it. You don't
right.
know the world you've been living in. As someone who just made huge record view changes in the old one, and then this came out the day after I launched it for our team, I was like, man, I needed this like 3 days ago. But it
Yeah.
is huge. And like, I think shout out to the HubSpot team because they launch betas all the time. And if you're not checking that at least once a week, you could be missing out on something that's driving you up the wall. I've frequently
Indeed.
said that Kyle has bugged my office because there's been times I've needed something and the next day they release it as a beta. And I'm like, that was quick. I needed this
Yeah.
feature and you brought it out right on time for me. And
Yeah. So powerful, Matthew.
I, I don't know why. It just seems to work out that way a lot.
I always had that feeling too. And like, I always like tie it back to like, they're constantly listening to user
Mm-hmm.
feedback. And I appreciate because I know that I'm way more like, receptive to and understanding of the baby steps they do take when they take them. And not everything is the way I want it. I know they're constantly iterating and innovating, and that the
Yeah,
other stuff will come and it will come faster when you tell them, like whether it's on the boards,
100%.
whether it's your post, you made on LinkedIn yesterday, getting product managers' attention, right? And
I
they'll,
always say the best piece of feedback, and this actually came from a product manager, and a lot of people don't realize this. Anytime you get one of those like I don't know if it's Pendo that populates it, but one of those pop-ups, kind of Pendo pop-ups that comes up and says, like, how do you feel about this feature? The product managers get an update every time someone fills those out. Like, I was guilty of get out the way. But legitimately, if you put in notes there, like I've had PMs reach out to me like a week or two later and be like, hey, you said this in a comment and I would love to know more about this. So if you have, even if it's the dumbest piece of feedback in the world, like, can you move this button? Which is some piece of feedback I've given before, which is like, this button's terrible. Please move it somewhere else. They do listen to that feedback. And I think that is something that people don't realize. And you can make a lot of friends at HubSpot just by like talking to PMs through those survey prompts.
just give me like 3 more seconds before you prompt me. Like, don't prompt me
It's
like
true.
right after I click into the, like, anyways. So to check those out, you click on product updates from the drop down and we'll search for unified. And that is live, no longer
It's
in the
live.
beta.
Yay.
So everybody should have it. I am going to check for the one that just uh, came out, some kind of,
All bound timeline card. I think that's the one you're thinking about.
yeah. All right. Join that beta.
I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm very much a enroll everyone into the beta sort of person. I'm very rarely like enroll myself. I,
Yeah. I am the same, but we are going to refresh this page. So make sure to connect with the beta. So we've got, let's see here, go back a couple times. And so we already had this card made and just some notes on that. If we want to change it, That's where like there's some of this stuff that people talk about. Well, this has been available, in this other system, forever. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but it sucks over there. Like the way they did it sucks, and it's hard to
Yeah.
manage, and it's hard to like, maintain. And so if I need to make changes, I'm literally like a couple clicks away and I can make changes. Obviously, you don't want everybody to be able to do this, but you can manage who can and can't do this very easily.
Yeah.
And I was super impressed and how they set up the filters, like and the manageability of these association list filters, which are available on this progress tracker and the property list cards. But the
Yeah.
ability to, you know, filter based on the property. Again, here we are, based
Yeah.
on the properties, you
Properties
can
again.
you can manage these views in ways that you probably won't believe, right?
Yeah.
We can change association labels. Only see a specific type of association label. Again,
And I
if
will
you're
give a good example of that, and I use it right now. Like we are my company. We are in education, so we deal a lot with districts. We deal a lot with schools, and the amount of times we'll have the same information on a district, but something different on a school, and having the ability to set up a card to be specific to one type of association is huge. Because we can say, oh, I may have like 10 properties on a company, but only 5 of those are relevant to districts, but all 10 are relevant to schools. I want my team members to know which ones do I need them to fill out. And I can create a card that's just the district association. I can pull up the card that's just the school association. And my favorite part, which is kind of, I discovered this by accident the other day, is that if someone hasn't done an association label, an error message comes up saying there's no associated objects. And that has prompted so many requests to me going, wait, I'm supposed to associate this? And I'm like, yes. And it's a very good way to subtly make your teams use association labels. Like, you can't edit data if you don't associate it. So it is a really powerful feature in building more custom team friendly views that gives your teams like the space they need to work in the way they want to work. And I've been a huge advocate for that for many years. That HubSpot has 5 different ways to do almost everything, and people work differently, and how I work as an admin is very different from how someone who's on the front line is working. And I'm huge into giving the team the ability to make those changes so they can work in a way that's just for them, how they view things, because everyone is different. We all learn differently, we all work differently, and giving people the option to have that flexibility is huge.
Yeah. And you definitely have to start there with some level of find the comfort for them from like 2 places of like if they're used to working in Excel, just like those cards, just they're exactly like you're putting them into an Excel spreadsheet,
Yeah.
right? Um, so there's lots of ways. And then you show them things like you just mentioned, like if you want this to be true, then you need to do this part. And that
Yeah.
for some, like they just haven't made that connection yet. It's
Yeah.
not that they don't want to do it.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like maybe they missed the training or maybe they're not understanding. And you said, no, this is why you do this. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I really want that to happen. So I'm going to do this every time now.
Yeah.
Right. So if we want to create one of our association property list cards, we add a card here and we create card. And we've got a bunch of association options, um, including association property list, right? Let's see what else we got. Uh, Probably have to go to the contact record, which I'm not on to see that new card.
Yeah. I
But
think
we're gonna
it's, yeah, usually the betas, they don't make them custom objects right out of the gate.
right. So we're gonna say session property list, and right now I usually just give this a copy, and then they're starting to do some really. This didn't always look this nice at the
Yeah.
beginning, right? So easily come up with, and this is based on your associations, which you've already set up or you haven't, multiple times in this process. This is where we're showing you the
Hard to go
end
back.
state right now. Uh, I'm going to show a map in a few minutes just to say like, this is where you need to start at some point. Right. So we go, let's add some properties, event format. I know I've got some links in here. Let's say YouTube video link. All right. And let's say, see if I have a post in here, the session LinkedIn post. All right. And we can add up to 12 here for the associated list, up to 24 if this was the primary record view. We can use association labels. We can even sort by, like, let's say I want to sort by date, let's say start date time. All right. And we can preview. All right. So again, we're making a card of session properties, which is a custom object, to go on the speaker's object, right? And we can see, can't interact with it, so don't see the full view. But I'm going to save it, and we're going to go back to, we're going to save first. We're going to save and exit. The big orange button, people.
Always hit the orange button.
Yeah. Can hit the back button. And one thing I didn't do is I kind of left it on the bottom here, right? But now we have, this looks the same. Why did it give me this tracker? That is curious. All right, maybe we got some feedback for the team.
Bravo.
Right?
Let's try and create another one. I was gonna say, if we do,
let's go to a not custom object. How about that?
Yeah.
So we'll go to customize record and go to contacts, do record customization. So multiple ways to get to this area. Default view. And we want to add these cards. So we have,
I will say that it's important to know that cards are saved in all your objects, but they are not cross-saved. So like if you make something in companies, it's not going to show up in your contact cards. But it does mean you can make several. And when I talked kind of Chris alluded to this earlier, when you're working on tabs, you have that option to create like custom views. The best piece of advice I can give people is make sure you make your internal name make sense to you, because that's how you're going to tell the difference between them without having to make them really weirdly named for your users.
Yes. Yep. And here's the new one, this activity totals, which I'm going to leave it named as that for right now, but you can choose a direction. This is cool. Outbound, inbound. Now I don't see the all bound one. So I'm going to just select inbound, and we will do inbound here. And save. I'm going to add one for outbound, just so we can see outbound activity totals. Personally, I could be done with all the fill in the blank bound labels, but we got to give the users what they want sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so not seeing, I'm just going to pull these up to the top.
Right. I will say, while you're pulling those up to the top, there's a lot of association-based cards that are specific to certain things, and one of those is, I think, in the contacts and companies, there's something called association label list, which allows you to do something really cool. Like we use association labels to identify stakeholders. So like, for example, if you're doing deals, you might have a deal decision maker or a deal decision team that you're associating. Those are really important. Yeah, that association label list, it allows you to put and say, I want to look at associations that have this. And it puts it right at the top and says, here's my deal decision makers. And I think that's where we're seeing HubSpot move away from using that sidebar and bringing that data that's currently kind of buried a little bit in that sidebar to be very visible and very upfront. Um, and I think it has huge implications when it comes to things like covering for people when they're on PTO, which seems like a really weird thing to think about, but it's something that happens a lot of times where sales reps have to you tell them to take PTO, so they take PTO, but they want to make sure someone covering for them has access to the data they need. And if you're using association labels well, and you have like good management of it and people are adopting them, things like that allow you to just very quickly show someone who's important. Like it might be a point of contact, it might be for some very specific reason. You can show multiple, but it gives you like a really quick way to get to the right person.
Yeah. And that's a great example of why you want to take the time to get the association labels right, especially for that salesperson who might, be trying to avoid that extra click. Like that handoff moment, whether planned or unplanned, like when you're unplanned and you don't have this data, you got internal calls and emails flying all over the place. Hey, the customer wants to close the deal. I don't know where it is. I don't know, what was agreed to. They're saying that there's a discount. Like we don't have it because you're gone. You're out of the office, right? When you create this visibility, all these gray areas, spots for,
Yeah.
the stress and the uncertainty for the user just melts away, and then it doesn't get transferred, to the customer experience. So we've got a couple activity totals here. I'm going to save. I didn't mean to hit exit. I'm going to come back in, just hit refresh, see if I can find some all bound cards and maybe check out the product updates, see if I'm doing something wrong.
The amount of time they've done that. I'm like, I think I'm doing this right.
Yeah. So we're on contacts. The new all bound timeline card offers a calendar visual. This is why I want to show it. Like this is something that hasn't been done in the center or anywhere. This is the kind of stuff where you're like,
Yeah.
when we first saw this last year, you're like, all right, this looks awesome, but there's React. They started saying React like everywhere. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
we'll need to develop it. And it's cool that
Yeah.
there's a React code database, but it's going to be work. So we're going to have to get somebody else to do it for us. And now we're seeing that the internal team has continued to work to create this stuff, which is very exciting. So we go to settings, objects, record customization, choose a view, add cards, select all bound timeline. And it says I'm in the beta. Page editor.
It's definitely not there. I've had this happen before. Sometimes this might be one of those get a log back in ones.
Yep.
That's happened to me before. Darn cookies.
But they have these standard cards. See, I'm not supposed to make a new card. It looks like it's a standard card. So we're going to add a card and see if they're lying to me. Nope. There it is.
Oh, there it is.
All bound timeline. Customer spend trends, sales. Look at all these. Like, man, if you haven't.
I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, we use DocuSign in my current company, and DocuSign has moved out of, and I see I think a lot more integration partners are going to start doing this, and app partners. They're moving out of, they've deprecated their right sidebar card, that's a hard word to say, and moved it now to the center because it's more functional. You can show more data, you can interact with more data when it's that center card in that table view. So I think it'll be an interesting trend for like app partners to move to, because for a long time they've been limited to just that right sidebar. And if we're bringing more stuff into that center card, it's going to give so many more options for what you can do there and make the record view more actionable.
All right. So this is cool. Like, so we are like Kyle's going to be in our customer platform hug next week. So we've been exchanging, some emails because I choose to use HubSpot as my communication management system when I'm working with partners and content creators and stuff like that. So this is like, man, this is really cool. Like, because and this is where, like, if you're buried on the activities tab and you're so used to that and you haven't moved off of that, you're missing out on so much, right?
I'm
With
really
these,
sad that you can't remove the activities tab. Is that a bad thing to say? Like it's run its course, and it is a place where people like feel like they have to use it. I'm like, there's better things than activities tab. It
right?
does have its place. I will give it that. Like I use it a lot as to troubleshoot workflow enrollments. Like lazily, I'll be like, oh, let me just go look and see what's enrolled in this workflow. But it's it's a messy place, and if you have a lot of integrations, like it can become very messy very quickly. So you have more control with the new center card functionality than you do with activities.
Yeah, and we only use it like, well, I only use it when I have to at this point.
Yeah,
So this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be digging into in this series. Like, we know, and again, the whole reason I started this show was to try and keep up with HubSpot, uh,
yeah,
which now I've got a bunch of other people like Matthew here in on this initiative to try and help people understand, because this is the kind of stuff. If you don't take a look at the overview tab because you're so used to activities, you are missing out on loads of efficiency
yeah.
gains that will take you 5 or 10 minutes to set up sometimes, right?
And
Um,
there's so much property changes and updates that are coming that are UI based. They are not. You do not need to code. You do not need to know how to code. And to that extent, you don't even have to have professional for a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is built into starter, and that is huge because a lot of times people think, "Oh, HubSpot gates things in enterprise and professional," and like there is stuff here. I'm amazed, not stuff that's all hubs, all fears. So there is definite like they want you to get more adoption, and they're not making costs a roadblock to that.
yeah, yeah, and it's there, like it's already there for you to access. And uh literally, this is why I always say the first step is just deciding that you want to do it, because then it
Yeah,
gets very easy. um so we'll be talking about more stuff like this. I know we'll be getting into strategy, because there are a lot of choices to make now that you have a wealth of options between sync properties and these, you know, cards, and who can see what when, who can change what when, how
yeah.
to manage that. We'll be going into all that in this series.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll even touch the users and permissions aspect of it too, which a lot of people forget about. Is there's a lot of control you can have over properties, and we just turned on sensitive data in our portal. That's a whole new thing,
oh
whole
man, we didn't even
conversation to
talk
get into
about
sensitive data.
sensitive
I
data.
know there's so much now, so there's a lot to unpack. We'll have lots to talk about for sure.
Yes, it's gonna be a good time. So join us on Fridays at 8 Central. And in the meantime, take a look at your center column of your CRM records, please. Uh, Click away from the activities tab,
Yeah,
find the opportunity, and let's grow. Have a great weekend, everybody.
take care, everyone.